Okay, today we're going over 5 advanced mixing tricks the pros use but never talk about. Let's get into it.
Here are 5 advanced mixing tricks the pros use but never talk about. And not because they're trying to gatekeep information, but because this is the stuff that if they talk about, people will assume that that is the secret sauce to a great mix. But that
So true. These are things that just end up working for the style of music that you're doing, and people find ways and things that work for them. There's no set in stone
is
way.
just not the case. This is the kind of stuff that can take a great mix and make it that much better. And some of these are things that are really good back pocket. You got yourself into a pickle and you need to get a good mix out of the recordings that you have.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. These are things that people have figured out to use, and it's been a part of their flow and habit since they've been doing
Kind of
mixing.
thing. And yes, some of them are keeping their secrets. Trick number 1 is sidechain multiband compress everything to the kick. This is something I learned from Buster Odehome, and I really actually had to dig for this one. This is a secret that he's been using for a while where he actually sidechain compresses everything to the kick. It's a very simple process where he
Very good for electronic music. Right, so I just wanted to show a quick example. This is some extreme sidechaining.
Tell me, baby, what you wanna say. Watch you when you walking away.
You know, very heavy dance styled stuff. Let's just keep it playing
adds
for
a
a second. See what it
multi-band
says.
compressor, and he just side changed the low end to the kick. So, for example, the synths, the vocals, the guitars, literally everything gets side chained to the kick. So every time the kick hits, just the low end of literally everything, even the drum rooms, are being pushed down by this multi-band compressor. And listen to how it just makes this kick sound like it's the most important and most powerful thing in the entire mix because there's nothing else fighting with it.
I'm glad they're saying that they're only sidechaining the low end, because when everything drops out, it could be very drastic, which is what you see in electronic music. But I'm glad they're showing this style of track because, for the most part, bass and or excuse me, for the most part, guitars and stuff, you don't need any of that low end. With the exception, I would say, if you're trying to use this with an 808. And then, so coming back to this, he's basically saying we're just going to sidechain everything at a lower frequency. So from here, it's 258 hertz and below that we're sidechaining.
Tell me, baby, what you wanna say.
If I go ahead and route this 808 to the sidechain, the kick should lower the 808. This is not what I like to do. I like to just have my kicks lay over top of my 808.
Tell me, baby, what you wanna say. Watch you when you walking away. Body on me, I want it every day. Need you to stay, I need you to stay. Tell me.
I wouldn't be sidechaining the bottom end. I would have that thump lay in there with an 808.
That kick is just really punching you in the face because, well, there's nothing else there but that kick to do so when it hits. It's a very fast attack and a pretty decently fast release, right around 100 to 200 milliseconds. This is going to be different per song and depending on how
Right.
much sustain that your kick actually has. But give this a shot. It's well worth your time.
That's dependent on the section and, like, if the song is going in halftime or like quarter notes, whatever. I would do a longer sidechain for certain parts of a song that I wanted to have like a cool effect for. So if something switched over to like a halftime beat, I would have certain things go to the side chain to give it like a swelling effect. Ends up being a pretty cool thing if it's done right. Okay, back to the video.
Suppression on effect sends. Sidechain resonance suppression is
Interesting.
essentially like automatic dynamic EQ. It finds resonances inside of whatever source you put it on, and it automatically locates those and turns them down. Plugins like Soothe 2 and Waves Curves Equator are great examples of this. So let's take a listen to these synths here. And notice how they do sound great already, but as we start to bring this down, it's starting to really attack those resonances that are up here. Let's also take a listen to what this sounds like on guitar.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful with this because if you end up making everything flat, things can get too bright. You want to keep some characteristics while not doing too much of this, so just be careful with this one. Sometimes it's good to have those resonant areas because it keeps the characteristic of whatever you have there, whether it be a synthesizer or guitar.
So it can
It reminds
make
me
a
of an
massive
OTT.
difference in how the resonances sound. Now, this is a super powerful tool just the way that it is, but I use this in a more advanced way. I will put this on the effects for the vocals and sidechain it to the vocals. So I'm actually sidechaining the resonances down when the vocals are singing, and then they get brought back up afterwards. So I'm still getting that lush reverb sound. Instead of me compressing it or automating it down like you typically would, you're actually just turning down the resonances, only the specific frequencies that are fighting with the reverb and delay.
Give me war, remind the saints what we're here for.
So it's allowing those reverbs to actually
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think that's a smart way to use reverb.
sit well alongside the main vocal without getting in
Right.
the way. Now, trick number 3
Right.
is automate the sends to your effect sends, not the fader itself. I know this one is probably a little bit confusing, so let me explain what I mean. So here we have our Vox effects, and we can bring this up or down depending on what we need for the mix. And automating this up or down is a great way to make things sound super lush, especially when you have a break in your vocals here. But let's say you have a phrase that goes from one section to the next. Well, that reverb tail would have to get cut back down. Not if you automate the send to the effects. There's this phrase when he says, "Give me war," where I want that reverb to tail on, but then the next phrase starts. And if I try to bring that up or down, it'll start to sound awkward by the time the reverb comes in for this section. So take a listen to what that would sound like if I automated this normally.
Me war, remind the saints.
So that reverb has to get ducked back down pretty quickly, and then that turns the reverb down for everything.
So he's basically having multiple things go to that and having them being turned down. It's like a difference in what you're hearing. And if you have compression messing with things or multiband type stuff, you could definitely hear the difference in that because it'll start affecting your compression.
But if you actually just turn the ascend to it and bring it back, that reverb tail will still continue on while still allowing that next phrase to sound super clean. So instead of automating this fader, which controls the volume for the reverbs and delays, I'm actually automating what's being sent to there. So listen how that reverb's tail still continues on while that next phrase sounds clean, while I'm only adjusting the send.
Me war, remind the saints what we're here.
This is super helpful, especially during bigger phrases like this, where he goes really off the rails and has a lot of fun towards the end of this song.
So what he's saying here is instead of automating the overall effect, which would be right here, my plate reverb, he's saying go ahead and automate the syn that's going to it. So I have multiple things going to this plate reverb right now, like this atmosphere right there, maybe this effect sound, and let's just include that right there, which is a riser. So all of those things are being affected whenever I turn this down when I'm transitioning. He's saying to take this and automate it to turn off right there. So the effect still happens through here at this section
Tell me, baby,
instead of.
tell me, baby, what you gonna show?
And so that's really exaggerated, but that's kind of the idea of what's going on. I really admire some of these tracks that people get to be a part of because they make them just sound so big, especially with all that reverb that he has going on. It's very cool.
That vocalist is insanely good. Mixing trick number 4 is
Yeah.
inverse equalization. It's like EQ matching, but just backwards. So the guitars and the synths are fighting with each other just a little bit.
Let's hear it.
And so you've probably heard of Match EQ. Ozone 11 does this, and a few other EQ plugins, and they're really helpful because what they do is they will listen to whatever signal you run through it. It will then create a curve and match it exactly so that way you can apply the exact same curve to your synth. Now, if you didn't know about that already, then this is already an advanced trick in and of itself, but I actually want to flip this on its head to create space. Plugins like Pro Q3 actually
flip it.
allow you to do the negative gain, and sadly, Ozone 11 doesn't allow you to do that. But if you don't have Pro Q3, you can use a similar EQ that allows you to see the frequencies of 2 different tracks.
Right, so I think what he's getting at, so let me just basically, well, what he's meaning by the inverse is if I pull this EQ up here, this is not exactly what he's saying, but this is the idea. So say that that's what I have, he's taking the inverse of that and basically doing that. It's just kind of doing it in its own little way. But as far as inverse, that's what he means, to create space. So one element may be right here, and then the next will be right there.
Playing at once to see where they're masking. So you pick whichever is the most important. In this case, I think the guitars are more important than the synths, especially in this metal track. So I want to put the EQ on the synths instead.
Yeah, another thing to point out is what has the priority of the section. You know, if things need to be in the background, let's make your guitars be
And have the
the
synths
important
be
part.
cut, not the guitars. And then I will just sidechain it to the guitars so I can see both frequencies at the same time. And then I will start to cut the frequencies where they're overlapping. You can also use plugins like Trackspacer or Pro Q3 to make this a little bit easier, but this is a quick and dirty way of doing that and making sure that things aren't fighting with one another. And mix trick number 5 is adding mid-range for a bigger bass. Typically, we think that if we want a bigger sounding bass, we need more
Okay,
low
last
end,
one.
and
I like
that
this
is
one.
not entirely true.
It's not the case. You start adding more low end to stuff, you're going to eat up your dynamic range. So instead of having your overall mix be like this, for example, he's saying take down the bass, add some mid-range to a bass line, something like this, do something like that. Not the most perfect representation, but you get the idea.
A thing called psychoacoustics. Psychoacoustics is basically how we perceive sound, not how sound actually is. It's how we perceive it. And for some reason, when there's a lot of low end, we don't perceive that nearly as powerful as when there's mid-range right above it. There are a few plugins that actually take advantage of this, like RBass, for example. When you add RBass, it's not
RBass is
adding
good.
low end, it's actually adding a low mid that's above that fundamental. And it really makes things sound super big and warm. So the fundamental of this bass is actually down here around that 60, 80 hertz-ish, but if I boost an octave higher around that 160, 150 range, you'll notice that it really starts thickening it up as well, something similar to what our bass is doing. Making that bass sound a lot bigger, even though I'm not boosting that super sub-low. Because we all know that too many sub-lows really can just destroy a mix. If you have made less than 2 songs in the last 6 months and you make music like metal...
He uses RBass. It's pretty cool. Let's use that one for now. So I have this 808. Maybe hard to hear, but I wanted to use something that you can kind of hear if you're listening to it on a phone. It has a higher end situation. I like to use Vitamin. It's a Waves plugin. Similar thing. Let me just turn this down a little bit in here. Yeah. So you can turn up the mid-range right there. And so I would do that on a mix if this was kind of being drowned out some, but I still wanted to hear it. And just exaggerating other parts of the frequency range. You can take that one step further by adding like erosion on it or something. Sorry, just trying to do this quick. You know, and then you can really hear that note. Maybe you want to add noise. See if he has anything else.
Rock, country, indie pop, something with somewhat of a dense style of mix, and you're just kind of frustrated.
It's cool stuff. I like the way that he goes in and describes this with the actual mix itself and does an A and B comparison. And some of these things are really helpful, especially the one about the inverse EQ and determining which is more important, the guitars or the synthesizers. Really cool techniques in that. Anyways, just saw this. Thought it'd be cool to go over. See you on the next one. Bye.